Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
If Islam was a white religion, things would be different. How many times have you been called racist by the left for criticising Islam? I'll take a wild stab in the dark and assume a lot. It doesn't matter how much you protest or how many times you assert Islam as an ideology, not a race, you're still an irredeemable Nazi in their eyes and nothing you say can have any merit at all. Say as much on social media and there's now a very real chance the police will stroll over to your house and have a little chat with you about hate speech. Yet, while we are correct in our distinction between ideology and race, this issue has been racialized past the point of no return by the left and we now have no choice but to address it. The reality of the situation is this: Islam is the brown religion. Even though Muslims come in all shapes and colours, the fact Islam has failed to take hold in the Western world on a mainstream level has made people categorise it as such. Christianity, while also originating from the Middle East, has been universally accepted as the white religion due to its history and influence in the shaping of Western civilization. So when it comes to political discourse about the effect of Islam in Western society, the modern intersectional left is operating from a base point of white versus brown. White people, of course, being the oppressors, and brown people being the marginalised victims. This means that before an honest discussion can even take place about Islamic terrorism, for example, the waters have already been muddied by the left to such an extent that it's probably going to be impossible to discuss the actual problem without hurdling a multitude of falsehoods along the way. We all know the score by now. After every terrorist atrocity, the left and establishment media enter an immediate state of damage control. First, they insist that despite multiple reports of the assailant screaming Allahu Akbar at the top of his lungs while stabbing people to death, his motive remains completely unclear. At the same time, blue-tick journalists and bloggers furiously castigate peasants like you and I on Twitter for daring to assume who was behind the attack, calling us spawns of Hitler and whatever else. This sometimes bleeds into real life too, exemplified infamously in a video recorded in a bar during the London Bridge attacks on June 3rd, 2017, when in an outburst of anger, one man blurted out, only to be meekly corrected by another man who pathetically whimpered,
"Don't shout at that, you fucking idiot. It's not Muslim."
You would think this tactic could only be a short-term solution because it never takes long to establish that the terrorists in question usually do turn out to be Muslim and their motives can be found in their religious texts. Amazingly enough, however, the left at this point decide to double down on their previous convictions and refuse to give up any ground. They still claim the attackers aren't Muslim because, as we all know, Islam is a religion of peace. These people are pretend Muslims, you see, using Islam as an excuse in order to create division in our multicultural utopian society. A message repeated to ad nauseum by politicians to make sure that however horrific the attack was, their main concern is seen to be the feelings of a certain demographic. From here, the conversation quickly turns to the far right and how they could possibly politicise the tragic event, because God knows, wanting to actually do something about the problem is right-wing and evil. At this time, local police commissioners, in a truly pathetic display, make speeches on live television where they grovel at the feet of community leaders and make it known that they will protect the Muslim population from a perceived onslaught of fascist death squads. Skip forward a couple of days and we have a candlelit vigil where people pretend to care about the dead in order to score some social media brownie points. Then the entire incident is swiftly forgotten about, brushed under the rug, and everyone carries on as if nothing ever happened. That is, of course, until 2 weeks later when another attack occurs, in which case the entire process is repeated. On and on we go, attack after attack, the police arrest people for hate speech, and the borders remain firmly open. Any attempt to suggest policies to fix this is quickly demonised as far-right propaganda and hate peddling. Contrast that with the reaction to the recent Las Vegas shooting, where the very same news outlets, Twitter journalists and opinion columnists had no such hesitation in claiming to know everything about the perpetrator and why he did it before the bodies were cold. This time, the problem was very clearly toxic white masculinity, and the solution was simple: gun control. When people like you and I asked for a motive to the monstrosity, something we still haven't been blessed with by the investigative authorities by the way, We were accused of sympathising with the killer. Apparently motives don't matter when the attacker is white, because whiteness itself is the motive. Yes, all those people in Las Vegas were murdered because the shooter was white. Don't you know how many awful things white people have done throughout history? Slavery, for one, even though Africans were enslaving Africans for hundreds of years before Europeans ever went to Africa and still do so today. The Crusades! Oh, we can't forget them. Even though they were a response to Islamic military expansions in Europe that had been going on for centuries, but we'll fail to mention that part. Donald Trump, or Donald Drumpf, as he's hilariously known, well, say no more. Yes, the same people who lecture us from their self-appointed moral high ground are hypocrites, shock horror. But worse than that, they're self-loathing worms who try to hang their collective white guilt around all of our necks. In a disappointing turn of events after the immediate aftermath of the Las Vegas shooting, someone I know quite well in real life posted on Facebook in all capitals, "Immigrants are not the problem." I thought it was an interesting thing to shout, considering this person had probably been waiting all year for a massacre to be committed by a white person instead of a Muslim from an immigrant background. I wondered if I'd get as many likes, comments and shared if I posted, "Immigrants are the problem" after the Manchester bombing. Probably not. In fact, I might be at risk of one of those previously mentioned police house calls, but the message being conveyed with that Facebook post was one of complete apologism and capitulation. This person would never be able to bring themselves to criticise mass murder committed by a brown person, or if they did, they'd never be able to nail Islam as being the reason behind it, because they'd constantly be restricted by their mental block of #NotAll. Indeed, everyone obviously realises that not all immigrants are Islamic terrorists, but people like this are the ones who accuse people like me of blaming all immigrants whenever something happens. Because of that, they simply cannot be seen to speak a word about Islamic terror in case the same accusation is levelled at them. It's a trapdoor they've unintentionally set for themselves, so they must do everything they can to avoid falling through it. Instead, they're reduced to jumping on the end of a slaughter committed by a white guy just so they can push their pro-migration, open borders politics and to point their finger at us and themselves. Another gem of an excuse people make about Islamic terrorism is, maybe if Muslims didn't feel marginalised in our society, they wouldn't do this. They also bring up poverty or lack of job opportunities as potential reasons. This is just another way of blaming white people for the crimes of Islam. It's really our fault all those people died on London Bridge because we're the ones who pushed those poor Muslims into an inescapable corner. Somehow, I don't think we'd be discussing socioeconomics if it was a white man who had detonated a bomb at the Manchester Arena, killing 22 people, mainly children. I also suspect if it was white people who were subjecting young girls to female genital mutilation at record-breaking levels across Britain, a few successful prosecutions would possibly have been made, rather than the grand total of 0 that have been carried out so far on the brown people who are actually responsible. If large groups of white men were responsible for the mass sexual assault of German women in Cologne on New Year's Eve 2015, would the city's mayor, Henrietta Recker, still have told women to keep at arm's length from strangers? Or would she have ordered an extensive police investigation to find and punish those responsible? If white men in Sweden were asking permission to marry children, do you reckon they'd be allowed to? Somehow I doubt it very much, but for migrants it's apparently fine. If a couple of white Christians had murdered the staff of Charlie Hebdo for drawing cartoons of Jesus, do you think media outlets would still have refused to show the offending cartoons? No. On the contrary, they would have been posted everywhere. Would the police, after all of these incidents, come out and make a public statement about how hate speech against the white community would not be tolerated and how they'd be working with white leaders to root out extremists from their neighbourhood? I think we all know the answer. I could go on all day explaining how the responses to all of these things would be different if the skin colour of the antagonist was a little darker. I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples yourself too. The fact is, our society is terrified of telling the truth about Islam. When your politics are shaped by the ideals of intersectionality, your words and actions are dictated by surface-based attributes, skin colour, gender, sexuality, etc. This way of thinking places numerous obstacles in the way of identifying problems and sorting them out. You can't be too critical of the perpetrators of Islamic terrorism, because as we all know, poor brown Muslims are horribly oppressed by evil white devils. Therefore, careful language and a certain amount of lenience must be given after they blow our children to pieces. The debate must be shifted towards how much of a threat the far right is, despite us having absolutely no evidence to support that claim and a complete lack of self-awareness to realise that if a problem did exist, We would be responsible for it due to our constant apologism. The left call us racist, but they're the ones who are obsessed with race. They're the ones who place ethnicity over responsibility and a Marxist-style social hierarchy over social cohesion. Oh yes, if Islam was a white religion, things would be different. You can purchase the first issue of the Iconoclast magazine from iconoclast-media.com. The link will be down below. You can buy it as a digital download, or as a limited physical print. A gentle reminder for those of you who have purchased a physical print version of the magazine or are considering doing so. Like I mentioned in my announcement video, the physical prints will not be printed until after the November 20th deadline. Then they will be posted to you. This is because my printers require me to order in bulk from them. This makes it more efficient and cheaper actually, because if I had to do it individually, the price of the magazine would have to be way more. But yes, just a gentle reminder, if you've bought a physical copy, November 20th is the cutoff date. They will be printed and posted to you after that date. So if you're expecting to get it earlier than that, I'm afraid you are mistaken. All the instructions will be on the website, so like I said, click on the link down below, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the articles that we've printed for you.